Και να καλέσω σιγά σιγά τον David Morgan να έρθει εδώ να μας παρουσιάσει την δική του παρουσίαση και τις δικές του εμπειρίες. Ο David Morgan είναι ο πρωτεύων πολιτιακός επιστήμονας στον τομέα της βιολογικής καταπολέμησης στο τμήμα τροφίμων και γεωργίας στην Καλιφόρνια. Ξεκίνησε να εργάζεται σε αυτό το τμήμα από το 2000 και στα 25 χρόνια που ακολούθησαν υπήρξε καθοριστικός για την ίδρυση 3 εγκαταστάσεων βιολογικής καταπολέμησης, οι οποίες απασχολούν πάνω από 30 άτομα προσωπικό και στόχος των εγκαταστάσεων είναι η μείωση της εξάρτησης της πολιτείας από τις συμβατικές χημικές πρακτικές. Πριν από τη συνεργασία του με αυτό το ίδρυμα, ο Ντέιβιντ έλαβε το μεταπτυχιακό και διδακτορικό του δίπλωμα στην εφαρμοσμένη ενδομολογία στο Imperial College του Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου. Εργάστηκε ως μεταδιδάκτορας ερευνητής στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Καλιφόρνιας στο Riverside και μετά μεταφέρθηκε σε αυτό το τμήμα της Καλιφόρνιας. Εργάζεται στη βιολογική καταπολέμηση κυρίως και η συμβολή του στην ασιατική ψηλίδα των εσπεριδών είχε ως αποτέλεσμα την απελευθέρωση περισσότερων από 32 εκατομμυρίων βιολογικών παραγόντων καταπολέμησης για τη διαχείριση ακριβώς αυτής της ασθένειας του κίτρινου δράκου. Έχει συνδράμει στην άπτυξη προγραμμάτων βιολογικής καταπολέμησης στη Βραζιλία, στο Ισραήλ και τώρα στην Κύπρο μας. Αυτή την περίοδο εργάζεται στα νησιά του Νότιου Ειρηνικού, παρέχοντας συμβουλές για τη διαχείριση ακριβώς της ασιατικής ψήλας των εσπεριδών και είναι τη χαρά μας που τον έχουμε σήμερα μαζί μας για να μας μεταφέρει τις γνώσεις. Μάρκ.
Kalispera. That's as far as I go, I'm afraid. So. Ευχαριστώ. That's it. That's it. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about what the government does in California and give some information about the level and the complexity of how we try and manage this pest problem and disease problem in California. So, as Mark told you, we have a lot of production going on. Our production isn't as big as in Spain, but it does employ a lot of people and involves a lot of farmers and is worth a lot of money. So it's very important to California. And so actually half of the money that the government uses to try and control this problem is raised by the growers. So every big box of citrus that's produced in California, they give us about 10 cents for each box. And that amounts in the end to about $15 million. That's matched about the same by the federal government, who give us money to help to manage this problem, and then the state government puts a very small amount in as well. So we're running at about $32 to $40 million a year trying to control this one problem. So it's they're taking it very seriously. You know about the insects, so I won't tell you much about this. An important component of what we can do in California is we bring what we do into law. So everything that we do has to be approved by our Senate in the state. And so this is actually written into our legal system so that we can manage this insect problem. And so that the problem is recognized as being sufficiently important that we need to actually do something about it. That was brought in 2009. This is our citrus production. So I'm down here in Riverside, about here. And then our original citrus production used to be down at the south of California, but this is actually the majority of our citrus production now. We've broken up our state into 3 areas, and I'll tell you more about this. And this is how we manage our Asian citrus psyllid and HLB issues. And I'll tell you more about this later, but the disease is present here primarily, as is ACP. And then in this area we have some levels of ACP, but not to any amount comparable to down south. So we have an advisory committee who advise us on how we spend our money, what we should be focusing on. So the state has asked members of industry, and these are often citrus growers. We have some very large citrus growers. We have a huge company called Wonderful Citrus, which is one of the world's largest citrus producers. They're very active in advising us. We also have nursery producers, and I'll tell you more about this, but our nursery industry is actually more valuable than our citrus industry. And they're very much impacted because we regulate how they move and where they move plants to and what they can grow, and how they grow them. So they're actually involved in it, and then we have other people involved to give us advice. So we try and develop a method for managing the pests and disease. A very important component is things like this, getting outreach, getting information out to people so that they're aware of this problem and they take it seriously. And then we try and get more money and from government and so on to try and perpetuate this information and treatment. So these are our strategic priorities: to identify and eradicate the diseased trees. So we're very much more interested in our stage and on the disease rather than the insect. The insect in Southern California is pretty much everywhere. So now we're looking at where the disease is. We then want to also control the movement of psyllids into new areas. So in Central and Northern California, we want to try and regulate them. And so we have enforcement regulations, and I'll talk about that. We need to suppress psyllid populations, and so that's what I do with biological control in urban areas. We try and improve our collection technology, so that's the sort of thing that Mark was talking about with his data collection system. And data is essential for effective management of pests. And then outreach to get people involved. So this is I don't know if this is going to work, let's see. This is a time-lapse pattern of where ACP, oop, dang, there it goes. Sorry about that. Okay. We go again.
It's working, okay.
It's working? All right. So you can see this is the ACP as it moves up this is Los Angeles, and it's now spreading into the citrus growing area of Southern California. And then down into our hot area. This is the very hot area. And then we're seeing the insect moving in 2013 up into the Central Valley, but still fairly small numbers. But this is where our most important citrus is. And it's sort of building up here. And then around about this time, 2016, this is really the epic spread of ACP occurred. And now it's kind of not really spreading that much more. So during that time, we developed different areas in California so that we have citrus growers and nursery producers, and basically we have regulations that prevent the movement of citrus products from one area to another. So if you're in one area, you can move the citrus around this area, but you can't move it across to a different area unless you've got special treatments going on. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And so that's very important, regulation of not only product, the citrus, but also of nursery products. So citrus trees, and also if you have other plants which are not necessarily the commercial citrus you know about, but maybe ornamental citrus plants such as Murraya, paniculata, which is in the citrus family and carries the disease. So you really have to be aware of these sorts of problems. So we've got, this is at the moment, we, as Mark said, we actually have almost 10,000 trees that are infected in California. We are slowly losing control of the number of trees. It is spreading. It is going not quite exponential, but it's pretty high. And so that is a problem. But we are still managing to keep the problem within urban areas. You can see all of these dots here where the plants have been found, the diseased plants, and where they've been removed. And this area now covers quite a large area. This is, quite a huge area. And also in the last couple of years, we've had a spread out into San Diego and up into Ventura, where there's also quite a bit of citrus production. So we have quarantine areas. So if you're within this quarantine area, the nurseries are not allowed to sell citrus. So if you're a big nursery, you don't move citrus into this area to sell it. You can't, it's illegal. However, if you're a homeowner, you can buy a citrus tree outside the area and then bring it in, but you're not allowed to bring it out again. And that's a very important component. We don't want infected plants to be moved out of an area into new uninfected areas. We sample for HLB, so these are the sites we sample. So many of them have more than one tree that are infected. And we also sample for ACP. And ACP are useful in identifying the presence of the disease in a certain area, but it can be very difficult to actually identify the tree, especially if when you collect that insect, it's not on the tree. So we have a pest system framework. So these are all pretty standard for all of you, so I won't spend much time on this, but obviously, as was mentioned before, we need to exclude, detect rapidly, eradicate when we find things, and then once eradication is no longer possible, we move to controlling, and then matched with this is identifying the system effectively, public outreach, telling everyone, and then getting scientific support from people like Mark so that we can further reinforce our control strategies and management of these pests using new and better developed strategies. And so this is our outreach, very important, make people aware. These are some of our responses. These are our staff delivering, putting up traps. We use these traps, which are they attract the insects. They're not incredibly effective, but they're better than nothing. ACP doesn't have a pheromone we can use to attract them in. People have looked for different chemicals to try and bring them in a bit more effectively, and there are some which are marginally effective, but they're uneconomically viable. You really can't. The benefit isn't worth the extra cost. So. We have responses. Once they're found, we do treatments. We delimitate the areas. This is for ACP. And then we survey all properties within 50 meters when we have a new ACP find in a new area. So this is not in Southern California. These are in new areas further north. Okay, and we do tree tapping, which collect ACP, and then these ACP are sampled, especially the hosts if the disease symptoms are present. Set up the traps. So we have different kind of trapping systems depending on the system, the environment you're in. And then we have treatments. So these are our standard strategies. We treat all properties within 50 meters, and then if there are more, that area gets increased to a much larger area. So, and then because of the politics of applying insecticides in areas, we need to educate and tell the public, and they have the right to refuse treatment. So this is my aspect. In 2012, the CDFA, the state agency that is carrying out this work, realized that they could no longer afford to manage ACP in urban areas. We have a lot of urban areas in Southern California, and in urban areas there are only a limited number of chemicals you can use. People applying it have to have special licenses. We have to access the public, the person who owns the property, and sometimes that's impossible. And then we have to talk to them, and sometimes that's impossible because they speak a different language. California is a melting pot of hundreds of different nationalities, so you need to be able to access that. So, and then they also ultimately have the right to say, no, you can't treat my system. So insecticide treatment really very quickly ceased to be a viable and effective option. So in 2012, they withdrew insecticide treatments for urban areas, and biocontrol is basically all we use in urban areas. We cover about 10,000 square kilometers with our treatments, and we've been doing that since 2013. So this is just a general strategy of what we do, and this is what Mark did in the early days. He didn't really cover this much, but this is how you find an excellent biocontrol agent. You have to find a good quality biocontrol agent. You have to develop a good, effective production system that's relatively economical to produce. This is something that's often missed. You have to have a good strategy for releasing the insect, the beneficial insect around the place to optimize establishment and to target the most high-risk areas. And then you need to follow up with monitoring, and that monitoring, first of all, tells you whether you're doing a good job or not, but also tells you that in future, what's the best things to be doing? Should you be continuing to release in one area or not another, especially at certain times of the year? So as Mark mentioned, during the summer in the desert, it's too hot. It's lethal for these insects. So there's no point in us releasing the insects in the middle of the summer in the desert. And so we focus releasing only in the spring and autumn in those areas. So we have facilities set up. So this is the facility I'm based in, and where Nikos came to visit me. This is in Riverside. We have another one at Cal Poly Pomona, which was purpose-built for us in 2015 with industry money. And then we have another facility up in the Central Valley. Asian citrus psyllid is still being eradicated there, so we only produce plants in this area. This is an indication of an example. So this is March of this year, and this is where we did our releases. So we release the majority of our insects we release in the quarantine area, because it's not only is it important for us to reduce ACP, but it's even more important for us to reduce ACP that are carrying the disease. So that's really where we focus, because we don't want disease-carrying insects to spread out. And so that's where the majority of our releases are. We also release along the border with Mexico. And until recently, the federal government had a group that released the biocontrol agents south of the border as well. And we're going to be taking over for that in the near future. So, and then we also release in sort of spots further north because we can react much more quickly than doing other control strategies. So. This is our monitoring. So these stacked area charts. The blue are the number of eggs. Is that? Yeah, eggs. And then we've got the number of nymphs, small nymphs, large nymphs, and then the yellow is the adults. And you can see in 2015 we were counting the number of ACP on 8 flush that we collected, and we would get over 80 insects on 8 flush. So there's 20 insects per piece of flush. So huge numbers. But we were releasing, and we've been releasing constantly in this area. This blue line is actually the pattern of flush of the plant, of the citrus plant. And so if you actually look earlier on, the citrus plants were flushing pretty much throughout the year back in the early years for some reason. And then when ACP arrived, they synchronized flush, and it may be that the ACP actually killed off the new flush and stopped any new flush from occurring. Or it could be that the plant themselves, they adapt to predation, and it may be that the plant is actually synchronizing its flush, because if the plant can stop flushing for a period, it can basically knock out populations of ACP, if that's possible. And they have actually looked at this as a control strategy in some areas, that if you have a monoculture, you can spray with a hormone to get the plant to drop all of its shoots on its new flush, and that will make a break in the population for ACP. But you can see this flush going on here, and you can see the numbers declining. And yes, as Mark said, we've got a little bit there. It's almost impossible for us to find ACP now. And it's very demoralizing when you're going out trying to find something and you don't find it. But zeros, as you know, when you work with statistics, zeros are actually very important figures to record. So this is the residential risk and commodity survey. So we actually survey all the time, and this is where a huge expense of what we do is making sure that, you know, we're keeping track of where the disease is and how do we look for the disease. Do we just look at random? No, we don't. We actually use quite a few different strategies for trying to find the disease in the environment. We actually had there is an algorithm, a mathematical model that was developed by the federal government from information initially from Florida, but now incorporating all of our information. And that uses information such as climate, human density, plant density, and so on, to factor in the highest risk areas that you're likely to find the disease. And so then we send our staff to those diseased areas to try and find plants that look symptomatic, or even just randomly sample plants in those areas. So that information is then collected, is analyzed. You can actually look at the symptoms for a disease, but there are a number of mineral deficiencies which look very similar. And so you can't be certain, even if you think that you see a disease, it may not be Huanglongbing. It could be zinc deficiency or manganese deficiency. And so it needs to be analyzed by a professional agency, and then that gets delivered. If it comes up positive, we actually then send that information to the USDA, to the federal government, who sequence the data, because we actually have written into our law that if we've come up with a positive plant, we're allowed to go into that person's backyard and pull the tree up. And obviously, people get very upset if you pull up their tree. So you have to try and explain to them and get them on board, and that's very important. But ultimately, even if they don't want it pulled up, we actually have the right to go in there, but we have to get a legal warrant to do it, and the police have to come along with us. So it gets very expensive, and they end up being very unhappy if you do that. So we avoid that in most cases. Yeah. So like I said, we have these different agencies doing things. So you can see this is the quarantine area in Southern California. And so this is where most of the activity is going on now for eradication. All of the eradication of HLB is down here. This is ACP eradication. And there's every now and again we get little outbreaks up here. But it's largely, this is governed, you know, largely where the citrus is present. You can see this is the citrus banana belt here. But, you know, people's backyards has citrus as well. And so we do get individual outbreaks in urban areas. So we have 60 staff full-time just doing this surveying. So in total, at the moment, our citrus program, which manages this problem, is around about 130 full-time staff. So what happens when we find a diseased tree? So we find a diseased tree, gets marked. First thing they do is they go in and they spray it. And they spray the tree with a foliar spray so that any insects on it don't fly off when you try and knock the tree down. So you don't want these insects spreading around the place. So that's the first thing. And then we have a mandatory removal. So yeah, this is I followed up already. And then we identify the tree, we dig up the stump, and we take up the whole tree. The whole tree is chipped, and what we do is we actually bag it and it gets buried. But I mean, there are more effective ways of doing it. One of them is to solarize the material. So the material has to be chipped and solarized, put under black plastic and heated up, and that's a good effective means of doing it. I understand you have some bio energy producers, so you could use this for burning, for fuel. So there are more effective strategies available. So, but the main thing is to remove the green leaf material and make sure there aren't any insects coming off it. And then the other thing is to make sure you pull out the roots, because the last thing you want are suckers coming up, secondary growth coming up from the ground, because those are perfect breeding grounds for Asian citrus psyllid. So you need to make sure those roots are dead. And that's what you end up with at the end, with any luck. Because the state doesn't have that in our code, we don't provide them with an alternative plant. But in the past, that was something that we suggested and thought about, that if you're going to pull up someone's citrus, they're going to be very upset. But if you can replace it with a plum or a cherry, then they might be a little bit happier. So that may be something worth considering if you have very upset customers. Okay, so once the plant is removed, you need to make sure that the citrus around that area is safe. And so we actually have pesticide treatments around the HLB area. We have 250 meter treatment area if a positive tree is found. And then we have the fortunate, or maybe unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, and being able to use systemic insecticides. They are extraordinarily effective, but we all know that they also have environmental consequences. So we do that, and then we notify the public. And this is a kind of example. So this actually becomes a very big project, because you're dealing with a lot of people. Each of those little squares is a house. So you're dealing with a lot of homes, and for one infection, it can cost $1 million or so. So here's trees are returning more. Okay, and then the regulars and quarantines. So we have quarantines around. So we have we detect, eradicate, and then we establish a quarantine area, and then we restrict the spread of pests and diseases by preventing movement of plant material. And we provide industry a means of cleaning up their bulk products, so their citrus products. If they do have to move it, we have ways of advising them how to keep things as clean as possible. So people moving material, citrus material, they actually have to, and nurseries, they actually have to sign agreements, being completely compliant and understand how things are going, what needs to be done. Okay. So we have a lot of growers under compliance. These are all growers that agree to this. And so the growers, people who transport, whenever they move the citrus needs to be tarped, so that you need to have a cover over the citrus so that insects don't fly off the bulk citrus when moving. The packing houses that clean up the citrus, they have to be compliant as well. And then it follows all the way through to the sellers, nurseries, and establishment. Nurseries are very much impacted. So we sort of told you about that. So we told you about ACP. And then in 2018, we really developed the quarantine structures. So we basically have any citrus that's produced in California now needs to be produced under a screened area. So you can't produce citrus out in the field, especially for nursery use. So again, this is a nursery quarantine system. So all citrus trees comes from one place. So all of our citrus trees originated, it came through one location where they checked for diseases. So our production should be really clean. Unfortunately, people smuggle in products, and that's one of the big jobs that we have, is identifying stuff that comes in without approval. And those include people who come in and graft their own products, mail order citrus. Sometimes, things come in through the mail, cuttings and so on. And then people who actively go to find cheaper prices, the growers, and they have backyard production. So we have to regulate all of this. We have a tagging system. So our citrus trees are actually tagged. So you can actually identify whenever I see a citrus tree in California, the first thing I do is look for a tag. And the tags are different colors depending on what area they're in. So you can be sure that they haven't been moved between the different areas. So they must remain within the quarantine zone. This is a screened house for production. This is standard now. We actually also have these plants are grown under insecticide treatment. So we have insecticide treatments going on. It's in a protected covered area, so that products are clean, and it has to be, obviously, these have to be produced outside a quarantine area. You can't have this production going on inside a quarantine area. Oh yes, and this has to be checked on a regular basis. So we have people coming out here to inspect, make sure there aren't any tears in the products, or we don't find any ACP in here. And that has been a problem. We've had rips and things. So this is a bulk citrus movement. So we basically just use all these factors, trying to safeguard fruit in transit, and then also try and reduce the any insects on the product. And these are some of the practices that we enable. There's washing in the packing houses to make sure that the ACP isn't there. But even out in the field, we actually have standards that we advise people to use, which are basically field cleaning methods. And we try and help growers with the way they do this. So we don't force them to buy expensive equipment. And if they can come up with a better idea, we'll advise them to develop that. So these are some of the ideas that people have. These are rolling systems, so that the fruit is rolled down and just inspected as it comes down to make sure there isn't any plant material. The fruit has to be completely free of any stems or anything. And also this shaking also would remove any insects being on there. So we've done a pretty good job. Yes, that was the first infection was 2012. It was illegally grafted, the disease, and then 2015 we had to expand the quarantine area because more plants were found, and then we currently have a quarantine facility of about 2,000 square miles. So, see that again, seen that. So these are the performance mitigation. So yes, this is advising, even within an area where the ACP is present, we advise how they do treatments. So we got field cleaning by machine, wet wash, pre-harvest treatments, and then we're willing to accept new concepts. And then within an HLB area, then they do have to have much more strict regulations, and yeah. And this is one of our larger packing houses, which is quite a state-of-the-art place to go and visit. So that's basically it. The other thing, and this is something that also will apply to you, that this has to involve everyone. And so it has to involve, the industry, because you need to buy into it. You're protecting your own commodities. But also you've got to realize which other industries are involved. The nursery industry is going to be involved. You're also involved with, we have outreach people. This is a citrus commodity group. So they're the people, they're almost like a union for citrus growers. This is our county advisors. So each state, each county in California has its ag commissioner group, and they have to be on board and they help us. Again, the research board is it's funded by the citrus industry. This is the clonal protection program. So those are the people who all of our citrus has to go through before it's allowed into the field, if it's from out of country. They regulate our insecticides. And then University of California, they're really excellent in developing new strategies, and they also give advice on which insecticides to use. As a state employee, I can't advise the growers which insecticide to use, because we need to be completely removed from benefiting individual industries. So with that, I think that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Λοιπόν, είδαμε σημαντικές προκλήσεις που πρέπει να αντιμετωπίσουμε σε διάφορα επίπεδα. Δεν είναι απλώς στο επίπεδο του παραγωγού που θα πρέπει να λάβουμε τα μέτρα από ό,τι είδεται σε περίπτωση εντοπισμού του βακτηρίου. Είναι σε επίπεδο του ιδιοκτήτη, αυτού στην πόλη που έχει ένα φυτό που ενδεχομένως και αυτό έχει προσβληθεί από το βακτήριο, αλλά και είναι και σε επίπεδο φυτορίων, τα garden centers, τα nurseries μας. Από ό,τι αντιληφθήκαμε, σε περίπτωση που εντοπιστεί ένα προσβεβλημένο φυτό, τότε σε μια ακτίνα από αυτή που θα πρέπει να κάνουμε εντατικές επισκοπήσεις, ενδεχομένως τα φυτόρια ή αυτά τα καταστήματα που πουλούν εσπεριδοειδή να μην μπορούν πλέον να διαθέτουν τα δεντρίλια τους εκτός από εκείνη την οριοθετημένη περιοχή, που είναι ιδιαίτερα σημαντικό αυτό και πρόκληση και για μας, σαν αρμόδια αρχή που θα πρέπει να εφαρμόσουμε τέτοια μέτρα, αλλά και προκλήσεις, όπως είδαμε, για να μπούμε σε ιδιωτικούς χώρους, να αφαιρέσουμε τα δέντρα, να τα καταστρέψουμε. Όλα αυτά θα πρέπει να είναι και για μας στο μυαλό μας, στο σχέδιο που θα έχουμε εμείς έκτακτης ανάγκης για να εφαρμόσουμε σε περίπτωση εντοπισμού.